Jake Morrison sat in the waiting room outside Admiral Patricia Hayes' office. His dress uniform felt stiff after months of wearing civilian clothes. The metal chair was cold against his back. He looked at his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. The Admiral was running late. The door opened with a soft hiss. Admiral Hayes stepped out, followed by a tall woman with short blonde hair. Jake recognized her as Colonel Amy Foster from the photos he had seen in military magazines. She nodded at Jake as she walked past. "Morrison, come in," Admiral Hayes called out. Her voice was crisp and professional. Jake stood up quickly and followed her into the office. The Admiral's office was bigger than Jake expected. Large windows showed the Earth below, blue and white and beautiful. Ships moved slowly through the space around the planet. Some were human vessels. Others belonged to alien races that Jake could not identify. "Sit down, Lieutenant," Admiral Hayes said. She walked behind her desk and pulled up a holographic display. Jake took the chair across from her and waited. "Tell me about your background," she said, even though Jake knew she had already read his file many times. "Former Marine, ma'am. Served 6 years before joining the diplomatic corps. Completed advanced training in alien cultures and languages. Currently rated for first contact situations." Admiral Hayes nodded. "And your combat experience?" 3 tours, ma'am. Fought in the border wars against the pirates. Led a squad through the siege of New Bangkok. Received the Silver Star for actions on Kepler 442b. Good. You'll need that experience for this mission. The Admiral touched her screen and a new image appeared. It showed a sleek ship with smooth curves and what looked like crystal panels along its sides. "This is a Zephyrian warship. You're going aboard one just like it." Jake leaned forward. He had heard of the Zephyrians, but had never seen one of their ships before. "What's the mission, Mom?" "The Zephyrian Alliance is at war with the Corvan Empire. It's been going on for 20 years. Both sides are getting tired. The Zephyrians have asked for a human observer to witness their next major battle." "An observer?" "Ma'am, that's right. You watch. You document. You do nothing else. This is purely ceremonial. The Zephyrians want to show other races that humans support their cause." Jake studied the ship on the screen. "Why me specifically?" Admiral Hayes smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Because you look like a soldier, Morrison. Even in a diplomat's uniform, you carry yourself like a Marine. The Zephyrians requested someone with military bearing." The image changed to show a reptilian creature with dark green scales and yellow eyes. Its mouth was full of sharp teeth. "This is a Corvan warrior. They're the enemy in this conflict. They've been taking Zephyrian mining worlds for decades. The Zephyrians are finally ready to push back. What are my exact orders, ma'am?" "Stay visible on the bridge during the battle. Take notes. Record everything. You see, under no circumstances are you to give tactical advice or interfere in any way. This is their fight, not ours." Jake nodded. "Understood. When do I leave?" "Transport leaves in 2 hours. You'll meet your liaison officer, Commander Lisa Park, at the spaceport. She'll brief you on Zephyrian culture and customs during the journey." Admiral Hayes stood up. Jake started to rise as well, but she held up a hand. "One more thing, Morrison. The Zephyrians have some strange ideas about humans. They treat us with more respect than seems normal. Don't let it go to your head." "What kind of ideas, ma'am?" "They think we're all natural warriors. Something about our history and the way we fight. Just smile and nod when they say things like that. Remember, you're there to observe, nothing more." Jake left the Admiral's office with more questions than answers. He had 2 hours to pack and say goodbye to his apartment on Luna Station. The transport to Zephyrian space would take 3 days. He had never been that far from Earth before, The spaceport was busy when Jake arrived. Humans, aliens, and robots moved through the crowds. He found his gate and saw a woman in a diplomatic corps uniform waiting there. She was about 30 years old with dark hair and intelligent brown eyes. "Lieutenant Morrison?" she asked as he approached. "Yes, ma'am. Commander Park?" "That's right. Ready for your first deep space assignment?" She picked up a small bag and started walking toward the transport ship. "As ready as I can be. The Admiral said you'd brief me on Zephyrian culture." "I will. But first, let me tell you something she probably didn't mention. The Zephyrians specifically requested you after seeing your service record. Not just any human observer. You." Jake frowned. "Why would they care about my record?" "Because they've heard stories about human Marines. Stories that may not be entirely accurate. But they believe them." Commander Park stopped walking and looked at him seriously. "Jake, the aliens out there think humans are the most dangerous fighters in the galaxy. I'm not sure why, but they do. That seems like an exaggeration." "Maybe, but the Zephyrians are paying us a lot of money to have you on their ship, and they're treating this like having a weapons specialist aboard, not just a diplomat." They boarded the transport ship. Jake found his cabin and stored his gear. Through the small window, he could see Earth getting smaller as they moved away. He thought about Admiral Hayes' warning and Commander Park's words. What exactly had he gotten himself into? 3 days later, Jake got his first look at a Zephyrian. The alien was tall and thin, with skin that looked like living crystal. Its movements were graceful, almost like dancing. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes. "Welcome aboard the Star's Edge, Lieutenant Morrison," the alien said. "I am Captain Vextar. Your reputation precedes you." Jake wondered what reputation it could possibly be. The Star's Edge was unlike any ship Jake had ever seen. The walls seemed to glow with soft blue light. The floors were smooth and warm under his feet. Everything curved instead of having sharp corners. It felt more like being inside a living thing than a machine. Captain Vextar led Jake through the corridors. Other Zephyrians stopped what they were doing to stare at him. They whispered to each other in their musical language. Jake could not understand the words, but their tone sounded respectful, maybe even fearful. "Your quarters are here," Captain Vextar said, stopping at a door that opened without being touched. "We have modified them for human needs. Temperature, gravity, air mixture, all should be comfortable for you." Jake looked inside. The room was larger than he expected. There was a bed, a desk, and what looked like a bathroom. A large window showed the stars outside. "Thank you, Captain. This is very generous." "It is our honor to host a human warrior," Captain Vextar said. The way he said warrior made it sound like a title. "We have heard many stories of human combat prowess. We hope to learn from your presence." "I'm just here to observe, Captain. I won't be participating in any fighting." Captain Vextar's crystal skin seemed to shimmer. Jake thought it might be the Zephyrian version of a smile. "Of course. You are here as a diplomat. But still, having you aboard gives our crew great confidence." After the captain left, Jake unpacked his few belongings. He had brought his dress uniform, some casual clothes, and his personal tablet loaded with books and movies. He also had a secure communication device to send reports back to Earth. A soft chime sounded. Jake opened the door to find a younger Zephyrian standing outside. This one was shorter than the captain, with skin that looked more silver than blue. "Lieutenant Morrison? I am Sub-Commander Thelris. I am the communications officer. Captain Vextar asked me to show you to the bridge." Jake followed Thelris through more curving corridors. They passed what looked like weapons stations, engineering sections, and crew quarters. The ship was much bigger than it appeared from outside. "How many crew members are aboard?" Jake asked. 237, Valrus replied. Plus you, of course. Everyone is very excited to meet you. Most of us have never seen a human before. What have you heard about humans? Valrus stopped walking and turned to face Jake. His large eyes were bright with interest. Many things. That you are fearless in battle. That you never surrender. That you can fight for days without rest. That you turn defeat into victory through sheer determination. Jake felt uncomfortable. Those sound like exaggerations. Perhaps. But the stories come from many different sources. Traders, diplomats, even former enemies who fought alongside humans. They all say the same things. The bridge was the most impressive part of the ship. It was a large circular room with stations, arranged around the edges. In the center was a raised platform where Captain Vextar stood. Holographic displays showed star charts, ship status, and what looked like tactical information. Lieutenant Morrison, Captain Vextar called out, "Please, come stand here beside me. You will have the best view of everything from this position." Jake walked up onto the platform. Every Zephyrian on the bridge turned to look at him. They all made the same shimmering motion with their skin that he had seen the captain do. "We will reach the Kronos system in 6 hours," Captain Vextar explained. "The Corvin fleet has established a blockade around 3 planets. Those worlds have mining operations that belong to us. We intend to take them back." Jake looked at the tactical display. Red dots showed Corvin ships. Blue dots were Zephyrian vessels. There were a lot more red dots than blue ones. How many ships do they have? 47 combat vessels. We have 29. Those aren't good odds. Captain Vextar's skin shimmered again. No, but we have something they do not expect. We have you. Jake wanted to explain again that he was not going to fight, but something in the captain's tone made him keep quiet. He was starting to understand that the Zephyrians saw his presence as more important than he had realized. Over the next few hours, Jake watched the crew prepare for battle. They checked weapons, ran system diagnostics, and practiced combat maneuvers. He noticed that they kept glancing at him. Whenever he moved or spoke, they paid attention. Commander Lisa Park contacted him through his communication device. Her face appeared on a small holographic screen in his quarters. "How are things going, Jake?" "Strange. The Zephyrians act like having me here is some kind of tactical advantage. I keep telling them I'm just an observer, but they don't seem to believe it. That's what we expected. Remember your orders. Stay visible, document everything, but don't interfere. What if they ask for my advice during the battle? Politely decline. Tell them you're not authorized to participate in tactical decisions. Make it clear that you're only there to watch." After the call ended, Jake went back to the bridge. The Zephyrian fleet was approaching the Kronos system. On the main display, he could see the 3 disputed planets. They looked like small jewels floating in space. Around them, the Corvin blockade waited. "Battle stations," Captain Vextar announced. Lights dimmed throughout the bridge. The crew moved to their positions with practiced efficiency. Jake stood on the command platform and watched. The Corvin ships were forming up for battle. They were big, ugly vessels with lots of weapons. The Zephyrian ships looked graceful in comparison, but Jake could see they were outnumbered. "Lieutenant Morrison," Captain Vextar said quietly, "are you ready to witness Zephyrian courage in battle?" Jake nodded. "I'm honored to be here, Captain." What he did not say was that he was also worried. The odds were not in their favor. If this battle went badly, he might not survive to write his report. But his job was to observe and document. Whatever happened next, he would do his duty. First shots were fired by the Corvin fleet. Energy beams lit up space between the 2 forces. The battle for the Kronos system had begun. The space battle was more violent than Jake had expected. Bright energy beams crossed the darkness between the fleets. When they hit their targets, ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. The silence made it seem unreal, like watching a movie with the sound turned off. Zephyrian ship Moonbeam is taking heavy damage, Sub-Commander Thelris reported from his communication station. They're requesting permission to withdraw. Captain Vexstar's crystal skin flickered with what Jake was learning meant worry. Denied. We need every ship in the fight. Jake watched the tactical display. The Corvin ships were bigger and had more powerful weapons. They were also better organized. The Zephyrian fleet was breaking apart under the pressure. Several ships were already badly damaged. "Sir, we're losing the left flank," another officer called out. "The Corvins are pushing through our formation." Jake felt his marine training kick in. He could see the problem clearly. The Zephyrians were trying to fight a traditional battle against an enemy with superior numbers. They needed to change tactics. A flanking maneuver around the enemy's weak right side would work. Or they could concentrate their fire on the Corvin command ship. He started to step forward to suggest these ideas. Then he remembered his orders. Stay visible. Document everything. Do not interfere. Jake forced himself to stay quiet and just watch. But his movement had been noticed. Captain Vexstar looked at him with hope in his large eyes. Several bridge officers turned to stare at Jake. They were waiting for him to say something. "The tactical situation is developing," Jake said carefully. "I'm documenting the battle for my report." The disappointment on their faces was clear. They had expected more from him. Jake felt bad about letting them down, but his orders were specific. "Starfire Squadron is requesting new orders," Thelris announced. "They can't hold their position much longer." Captain Vexstar looked lost. The battle was not going well. More Zephyrian ships were taking damage. The Corvin fleet was pushing them back toward the edge of the system. Jake's hands clenched into fists. Everything in his training told him to help. He could see exactly what needed to be done. But he was here as a diplomat, not a soldier. He had to follow orders, even if it meant watching good people die. "Sir," Thelris suddenly sounded excited. "I'm getting strange communications from the Corvin fleet." "What kind of communications?" "They're not tactical orders. They sound like ... questions. Requests for information." Captain Vexstar frowned. "Put it on the main speakers." A harsh voice filled the bridge. It spoke basic English with a heavy accent. "Zephyrian fleet, this is Admiral Kreshtok of the Corvan Empire. We are detecting unusual readings from your flagship. Please identify the nature of your tactical enhancement." Jake and Captain Vexstar looked at each other. Neither understood what the Corvin Admiral meant. "They want to know about tactical enhancements," Thelris translated. "But we don't have any new weapons or systems." "Maybe they're trying to confuse us," another officer suggested. The Corvin Admiral spoke again. "We are detecting a human life. Sign aboard your command vessel. Please confirm the presence of human military personnel." Jake felt his blood turn cold. They had detected him somehow. But why did that matter to them? Captain Vexstar activated the communication system. "Admiral Kreshtok, we have a human diplomatic observer aboard. He is not military personnel." There was a long pause. Then the Corvin Admiral's voice came back, sounding different, worried. "Diplomatic observer? A human? On a warship during active combat?" "That is correct." Another pause. Jake could hear other voices in the background of the Corvin transmission. They were arguing about something in their own language. "Zephyrian fleet," Admiral Kreshtok said finally. "We request immediate cessation of hostilities. We wish to discuss terms." Captain Vexstar's skin went completely white. Every Zephyrian on the bridge stared at the communication console in shock. "Sir," the tactical officer whispered. "The Corvin ships are powering down their weapons." Jake looked at the main display. The red dots representing enemy ships were changing color. Their formation was breaking up. Several Corvin vessels were already turning away from the battle. "I don't understand," Captain Vextar said. "We were losing the battle. Why are they offering to negotiate?" Admiral Kreshtalk's voice came through the speakers again. "We were not informed that human forces were involved in this conflict. The Corvin Empire has no desire to engage in combat with human military assets." "But he's just an observer," Captain Vextar protested. "A human military observer on a warship during combat operations? We are not fools, Captain. We know what that means." Jake stepped forward. "Admiral Kreshtalk, this is Lieutenant Jake Morrison of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. I am here purely as an observer. I have no combat role." The silence that followed lasted almost a full minute. When Admiral Kreshtalk spoke again, his voice shook. "Lieutenant Morrison, we have heard that name. You are the hero of New Bangkok, the Marine who held off an entire pirate fleet with only a squad of soldiers." Jake blinked in surprise. "That's not exactly how it happened. And Kepler 442b, they say you walked through enemy fire like it was rain, that you never stopped fighting, even when your armor was destroyed. Those reports were exaggerated, double quotes, human military legend aboard a Zephyrian warship. The Empire withdraws from this engagement immediately. We will not face human tactical superiority today." The communication ended. Jake stood on the command platform, confused and amazed. Around him, the Zephyrian crew was celebrating. They had won a battle they were losing, and they thought it was because of him. Captain Vextar approached Jake with something like worship. In his eyes, "Lieutenant Morrison, we are in your debt. Your reputation alone has saved our fleet." Jake wanted to explain that he had done nothing, that the Corvins were mistaken about human capabilities, that this was all a big misunderstanding. But looking around the bridge at the happy faces of the Zephyrian crew, he decided to keep quiet. Sometimes it was better to let people believe what they wanted to believe. The battle for the Chronos system was over. The humans had won without firing a single shot. The journey back to Zephyrian space took 5 days. Jake spent most of that time trying to understand what had happened. The Corvin fleet had completely withdrawn from the Chronos system. They had left behind valuable equipment and even abandoned 2 damaged ships. It made no sense from a military perspective. Captain Vextar invited Jake to dinner in the officers' mess on the second day. The food was strange but edible. It tasted like flowers and metal. Jake ate politely while the Zephyrian officers asked him questions about human military tactics. "Is it true that humans can fight without sleep for weeks?" asked the weapons officer, a Zephyrian named Delron. "No," Jake replied. "Humans need sleep just like everyone else. We can stay awake for a few days in an emergency, but not weeks." The officers looked disappointed. Delron tried again. "But the stories say human Marines once held a fortress for 30 days without rest. Those stories are probably exaggerated. Human soldiers are tough, but we're not superhuman." Sub-Commander Thelris leaned forward. "What about the Battle of Proxima? We heard that a single human ship destroyed an entire pirate fleet." Jake had heard of that battle. The U's Defender had a crew of 300 people. It wasn't one person fighting alone, and they had help from local defense forces. But no matter what Jake said, the Zephyrians seemed to believe that humans were incredible warriors. They had stories about human soldiers that sounded more like myths than history. Humans who could see in complete darkness. Humans who could survive in space without suits. Humans who never retreated from any battle. On the third day, Jake received a recorded message through his secure communication device. It was from Dr. Helen Chong, a human scientist working with the Zephyrian government. She had been studying alien cultures for 10 years. "Jake," Dr. Chong's voice said from the small, holographic display. "I heard about what happened at Kronos. I'm not surprised. The aliens out here have some very strange ideas about humanity." Dr. Chong was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She looked tired in the recording. "It started about 15 years ago," she continued. "Human ships began showing up in border conflicts. We usually won because we had better tactics and more determination than our enemies expected. But the stories grew in the telling." Jake paused the message and made himself a cup of coffee. The machine on the star's edge could make something that almost tasted like real coffee. "The problem is that most alien species evolved very differently from humans," Dr. Chong explained when Jake restarted the message. "They come from worlds where cooperation was more important than competition. They don't understand our history of constant warfare. To them, the fact that humans fought each other for thousands of years is terrifying." That made sense to Jake. Earth's history was full of wars and conflicts. Humans had been fighting each other since they learned to make weapons. Other species might find that frightening. So when humans show up and start winning battles, the aliens assume we must be naturally superior warriors. They don't realize that we're just more experienced at fighting. The message continued with Dr. Chong explaining how the stories had grown over time. A human squad that held off an enemy attack became a single human holding off an army. A clever tactical move became evidence of superhuman intelligence. Every victory was proof that humans were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The government knows about this reputation, but they don't discourage it. Having other species afraid of us can be useful in negotiations. On the 4th day, Jake got another message. This one was from Lieutenant Ben Rogers, a human military attach working with the Galactic Defense Force. The message was marked as classified. "Morrison," Rogers said in the recording, "I've been tracking what happened at Kronos. The Corvin withdrawal was immediate after they detected you. Their retreat was so fast, they left behind equipment worth millions of credits." Rogers was younger than Jake, with short brown hair and the look of someone who had seen combat. He spoke quickly and directly. "The Corvins have a database of human military personnel. They know about every major battle humans have fought in for the past 20 years. Your name is in there because of New Bangkok and Kepler 442b. Jake remembered those battles. New Bangkok had been a desperate defense against pirate raiders. His squad had held a landing zone for 6 hours until reinforcements arrived. Kepler 442b was even worse. His unit had been cut off from the main force and had to fight their way to safety through enemy territory. The thing is, Jake, the alien reports of those battles make you sound like some kind of super soldier. According to Corvin intelligence files, you personally killed over 200 pirates at New Bangkok." Jake nearly choked on his coffee. The actual number had been maybe 20, and most of those were with explosives and squad-level weapons. The Kepler 442b report says you fought for 3 days without stopping, carried wounded soldiers while under fire, and never missed a shot. They think you're practically invincible." Jake shook his head. War stories always grew in the telling, but this was ridiculous. So when the Corvins detected a human military asset on a Zephyrian warship, they assumed it meant serious business. They thought Earth was sending in the elite forces. Nobody wants to fight the legendary Jake Morrison. The message ended with Rogers laughing. Jake did not find it funny. His reputation was based on lies and exaggerations. But apparently, those lies were powerful enough to end wars. On the 5th day, as they approached Zephyrian Prime, Captain Vextar called Jake to his private office. The room was small and comfortable, with soft lighting and what looked like family. Pictures on the walls. Lieutenant Morrison, the captain said. I want to thank you personally for what you have done for my people. Captain, I need to be honest with you. I didn't do anything. The Corvins made a mistake. Captain Vextar's skin shimmered with what Jake now knew was amusement. Perhaps, but the result is the same. The mining worlds are free. My crews are alive. That is what matters. Jake sat down in the chair across from the captain's desk. Don't. You care that your victory was based on a misunderstanding? Lieutenant, in my 50 years as a military officer, I have learned that victory comes in many forms. Sometimes you win through superior firepower. Sometimes through better tactics. And sometimes you win because the enemy is afraid to fight you. All victories count the same. Captain Vextar stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Jake could see Zephyrian Prime growing larger as they approached. Besides, the captain continued, perhaps the Corvin fear is not entirely unreasonable. You are here, after all, a human warrior on our ship. Even if you do not fight, your presence changes everything. That is a kind of power. Jake thought about that as they entered orbit around the Zephyrian homeworld. Maybe the captain was right. Maybe it did not matter why the Corvins had surrendered. The important thing was that the war was over and nobody else had to die. But Jake also realized that he now had a responsibility he had never asked for. His reputation, real or imagined, was a weapon. And like any weapon, it could be used for good or evil. The question was, what was he going to do with it? Zephyrian Prime was beautiful from orbit. The planet looked like a giant blue and green jewel with white clouds swirling around it. Crystal cities reflected sunlight from the surface. Jake had never seen anything like it. The landing at the capital. Spaceport was ceremonial. Thousands of Zephyrians had gathered to welcome the Star's Edge home. They cheered when Captain Vextar appeared at the ship's exit. But when Jake stepped out behind him, the crowd went completely silent. Jake felt uncomfortable. With all the attention, he had not done anything to deserve it. But the Zephyrians looked at him like he was some kind of hero. Children pointed at him with wide eyes. Adults bowed respectfully as he passed. The Zephyrian High Council met them at the spaceport. These were the oldest and most important leaders of their civilization. They wore robes that seemed to be made of living light. When they moved, colors shifted and flowed across the fabric. Lieutenant Morrison, said the council leader, an ancient Zephyrian named Seventh. The Zephyrian Alliance owes you a great debt. Your presence alone ended a war that has cost us 20 years of suffering. Jake wanted to explain again that he had done nothing. But he was getting tired of trying to convince aliens that humans were not as dangerous as they believed. Maybe it was better to just accept the gratitude and move on. I was honored to serve as an observer, Jake replied diplomatically. Captain Vextar and his crew showed great courage in battle. The High Council was pleased with his answer. They offered the human government a new trade agreement worth billions of credits. They also wanted to establish a formal military alliance, all because they thought one human observer had scared off their enemies. Jake spent 3 days on Zephyrian Prime, attending ceremonies and meetings. Everyone wanted to meet the human warrior who had ended the Corvin War. Jake smiled and shook hands and tried to look modest. Inside, he felt like a fraud. On his last day, Jake received a priority message from Admiral Hayes. Her face appeared on his communication device, looking serious. Morrison, report to Earth immediately. We need to debrief you on what happened at Kronos. Jake was glad to leave. The hero worship was making him uncomfortable. He said goodbye to Captain Vextar and the crew of the Star's Edge. They treated him like he was leaving family behind. The journey back to Earth took a week. Jake spent the time writing his official report and thinking about everything that had happened. He had been sent to observe a battle. Instead, he had accidentally ended. A war just by being there. Admiral Hayes was waiting for him when he arrived at Luna Station. She looked pleased, but also thoughtful. "Interesting mission, Lieutenant," she said as they walked through the corridors toward her office. "The Corvin Empire has requested formal peace negotiations with Earth. They want to make sure there are no more misunderstandings about human military involvement." Jake sat down in the familiar chair across from the Admiral's desk. Earth looked the same as always through the big windows, blue and peaceful and home. "Ma'am, I need to tell you something. My reputation out there is based on exaggerated stories. The aliens think I'm some kind of super soldier, but that's not true." Admiral Hayes smiled. "I know exactly what your reputation is based on, Morrison. We've been tracking these stories for years. You knew?" "Of course we knew. Why do you think? We sent you specifically?" This mission was a test to see how other species would react to an obvious human military presence. Jake felt stunned. "You used me as bait." "We used you as a diplomatic tool, and it worked better than we expected. The Corvins surrendered so fast, they didn't even have time to send out distress calls. Other species are going to hear about this." Admiral Hayes activated her holographic display. It showed a map of local space with dozens of star systems marked in different colors. "There are 17 ongoing conflicts in this sector alone," she explained. "Wars that have been dragging on for years. Millions of casualties. Trillions of credits and damage." Jake began to understand what she was suggesting. "You want to send human observers to other conflicts. I want to create the Human Observer Corps, a new branch of the diplomatic service dedicated to ending wars through our reputation alone." The idea was brilliant and terrifying at the same time. Human observers could potentially stop wars without anyone having to fight. But it was also based on lies and fear. "What if someone calls our bluff?" Jake asked. "What if an enemy decides to fight despite having humans present? Then we'll deal with that situation when it happens. But right now, our reputation is a powerful weapon for peace. We'd be foolish not to use it." Admiral Hayes offered Jake a promotion to lieutenant, colonel in command of the new Observer Corps. He would train other humans to serve as diplomatic observers in alien conflicts. They would use humanity's fearsome reputation to prevent wars instead of fighting them. Jake thought about Captain Vextar and the crew of the Star's Edge. They were alive because the Corvins had been afraid to fight a human. He thought about the 17 conflicts the Admiral had mentioned. How many lives could be saved if human observers could end those wars peacefully? "I accept the position," Jake said. Over the next 6 months, Jake recruited and trained 20 human observers. They were all former military personnel with impressive service records. More importantly, they looked like soldiers even when wearing diplomatic uniforms. The first deployment was to the Antares system, where 2 alien civilizations had been fighting over water rights for 30 years. Lieutenant Colonel Susan Blake, a former Army Ranger, served as observer aboard a hegemony cruiser. The enemy fleet withdrew after 2 days. The second deployment was even more successful. Major Carlos Rodriguez ended a siege that had lasted 6 months just by arriving at the Chul battle zone. The attacking forces retreated so quickly they left behind their entire supply fleet. News of these successes spread throughout the galaxy. The human observer corps became famous. Alien governments began requesting human presence at their conflicts. Some wars ended before the observers even arrived, simply because both sides knew humans were coming. Jake established his headquarters on Luna Station, in the same building where he had first met Admiral Hayes. His office had windows that looked out at Earth. Sometimes he would sit there and wonder if they were doing the right thing. The success of the Observer Corps was undeniable. In 1 year, they had ended 12 major conflicts without firing a single shot. Millions of lives had been saved. trade routes that had been closed for decades were reopening. The galaxy was becoming more peaceful, but Jake also knew it was all built on fear and misunderstanding. Other species were afraid of humans because they believed stories that were not true. What would happen when someone discovered the truth? That question was answered 6 months later when Jake received an urgent message from Major Linda Foster. She was serving as an observer in the Vega system, where the Crystalline Collective was fighting the Machine Brotherhood over asteroid mining rights. Colonel Morrison, Linda's voice was tense in the recorded message. "We have a problem. The Brotherhood has been studying human military records. They've figured out that our reputation is exaggerated." Jake felt his stomach drop. This was what he had been afraid of. "They're calling it the human bluff," Linda continued. "They say humans are just another species with better marketing. They're refusing to withdraw and demanding that I prove human military superiority by personally fighting their champion." Jake immediately contacted Admiral Hayes. Within an hour, he was on a fast courier ship heading for the Vega system. The journey would take 4 days. He hoped he would not be too late. When Jake arrived in the Vega system, he found both fleets facing each other across a field of asteroids. The crystalline ships looked like flying diamonds. The Machine Brotherhood vessels were angular metal, constructs bristling with weapons. Between them floated Major Foster's observation ship. Jake requested permission to come aboard the Brotherhood flagship. To his surprise, they agreed. He found himself face to face with Supreme Constructor Apex 7, the leader of the Machine Brotherhood fleet. Apex 7 was a robot, but not like any Jake had seen before. It was tall and elegant, with a body made of flowing metal that seemed to move like liquid. Its eyes glowed blue. "So," Apex 7 said in a voice like grinding gears, "the famous Jake Morrison comes to threaten us personally. I'm here to prevent unnecessary bloodshed," Jake replied calmly. "By doing what?" "Your reputation is built on lies. We have analyzed every human military engagement for the past 50 years. You are competent fighters, but not the unstoppable warriors the galaxy believes you to be." Jake realized that trying to bluff would not work. Apex 7 was too smart and had done too much research. He needed a different approach. "You're right," Jake admitted. "Human military capabilities have been greatly exaggerated. We're not superhuman warriors." Apex 7 seemed surprised by the honest answer. "But," Jake continued, "that doesn't change what we've accomplished. In the past year and a half, human observers have ended dozens of conflicts. Millions of lives have been saved. Trade has increased throughout this sector. The galaxy is more peaceful than it has been in decades. All based on deception. All based on the idea that maybe, just maybe, fighting is not always the best solution to problems." Jake walked to the viewport and looked out at the two fleets. "You could attack the Crystalline Colonel,"